I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite Lorecast on the Citadel.
Welcome to the Mass Effect Lorecast, the podcast where we explore the vast universe of lore behind the Mass Effect games. We'll talk about all the details you may have missed, ask the hard questions, and more. Spectres, welcome back to the Mass Effect Lorecast. This is episode 49. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and I'm back with N7, the legend. Welcome back, N7. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm also doing well. We have that in common.
I'm glad. I'm glad we're both having a night when we're doing well. I've got some time off work this week.
Oh,
so
no.
I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome. Congratulations. Hey, man, we were just talking in the last episode about these, about Outcasts, the awesome musical act.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
Oh, no. I'm also about these exile groups that were spawning from all this, the hullabaloo going on with everyone getting pissed off at each other in Andromeda because they showed up and things were being mismanaged and everybody got all mad and stuff. I have a feeling we're going to talk more about some of that stuff. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, that and Andre 3000. No,
sweet.
So yeah, we were talking about the rebellions. We basically, as a little rundown, in case you missed the last episode, the Milky Way colonists became exiles in Andromeda because of this series of events following the Andromeda Initiative's first arrival in the Helios cluster. There was a confluence of events, a lack of resources, a dark energy storm called the Scourge, and a very not transparent decision-making process in leadership, which did not do a good job of factoring in everyone's needs above leadership's, and of course the general stress of survival. Those all came to a fever pitch, and it pushed a portion of the Milky Way colonists to rebel against Initiative Command. So corpos are going to corpo, and bad stuff's going to happen, and then they're going to be like, oh, I guess we did a bad job, but let's not tell anybody, and then everyone's going to get pissed off at them. Oh, yeah. And that's not even factoring in like how underqualified leadership was after most of the leadership got killed in the Scourge collision. So that's not even factoring that in. But, we talked about that last episode. And so I wanted to talk about that last episode. And I wanted to talk about what we're talking about this episode when we did, because it's kind of foundational knowledge to understand why the two major factions of the Exiles are at war with each other. And so the Exiles as an entire group, a loose group, they leave the Nexus and some settle on Kadara, some settle other places. Exiles are scattered throughout the Helios cluster. But while they are scattered throughout the Helios cluster, we're going to focus on the ones on Kadara today. Among those who settled on Kadara, two groups really seem to rise in prominence, and they don't really like each other.
Imagine
Actually,
that.
That's an understatement. That's a very large understatement. They hate each other. And those groups are the Outcasts and the Collective.
So Outcasts and Collective Soul. I wasn't really a big fan of Collective Soul. I thought they were pretty lame back in the 90s. Outcasts, though, man, they got some good jams.
Does this count as our new band for the Milky Way tour that we've got going on?
I mean, they're already a band. I think that they just survived into this point in the future. I think somebody kind of like Futurama took like Andre 3000's head and the other guy. What's the other guy? Big Boy. And just kind of froze their heads and then like reanimated them in the future. And then now they're just still making music.
I'll tell you one thing, that would not have made Andromeda worse. It wouldn't.
No. But Collective Soul, heaven let your light shine down. No, thank you. No, not at all. So from this moment on, I'm pro Outcast, not pro Collective. I hope they win. And I hope they're not terrible. I'm guessing I'm wrong. I'm guessing I'm going to be wrong here, but that's where I'm going. So let's talk about the Outcasts.
That is a bold move, and I'd hope that by the end of this episode, you will reevaluate your position on that.
I mean, it's just the music is just so much better.
I would agree there, but if the musical group Outcasts are anything like the Andromeda's Outcasts, then I'm not going to buy another record of theirs. In fact, I've never bought a record.
I was wondering why you said record. Okay, Boomer. All right.
Okay, so it's time to talk about the Outcasts.
I put the record on my 8-track recorder so I could listen to it in my Volkswagen.
Oh no, did you hear that little ditty? Let's replay that one again.
No, seriously, the Outcasts. It's a group of criminals and dissidents who are selected, handpicked, and led by
Sorry. Rob the Princess in Chats wrote, sorry, Miss Shepherd. Ooh. I am for real.
It doesn't count as DMCA if we sing it.
Oh my God. No, it doesn't. All right. Sorry.
That's fair use.
Back on track.
Yeah, the Outcasts are a group of criminals and political dissidents who were selected, handpicked, and led by former security chief Sloane Kelly, which is interesting because they are not just exiles who were exiled for political reasons, but it includes criminals. Mm-hmm. Like actual people who had prior criminal behavior before that.
Well, the best music comes from like the real tough places sometimes.
I'd hope not from these people, because they aren't very good. But this whole thing is interesting because Sloane Kelly, the former head of security, is handpicking these people, and maybe she wouldn't have been a very good head of security if she had stayed on the Nexus anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If this is who she's picking to be surrounded by in her faction. And after they leave the Nexus, the Outcasts run out of resources. They start going hungry and they decide to pick off Ket convoys, and then they'll take the Ket. So I had some confusion when I heard that they were picking off Ket convoys, because I'm like, what the hell could they use Ket goods for? They can't even eat that food. Right? I mean, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, unless it's like a tech that's useful for them for some reason.
Maybe guns, because we know from the player character that humans can use Ket guns, but it's not. I don't know. The point is that they take this stuff and then they end up trading it. So they trade it with the Angara villages, and which probably helps to make a good name for humanity and the Milky Way species there. But I still have some questions because it's still Ket stuff. So is it usable?
Yeah, that's weird. I wonder if the biological part of the Ket need certain things.
Yeah, I'd wonder as well. Considering that most of the Ket that we run into in Andromeda are actually of Angaran descent, my guess is that the Angara can still use a lot of their stuff. Mm-hmm. The Angara and the villages are probably just happy the Ket are dead. So they're probably just like, yeah, give us the junk. Fuck it. We don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
And speaking of dead Ket, the Outcasts kick out occupying Ket from Kadara's Port, and they quickly supplant them as the gang in charge. And I still refer to them as a gang for a reason. They're distinguished from the other exile groups because they're much more militant, the Outcasts are. And they're much more hostile than their rival, the Collective. They're not afraid to even strike against the Initiative's security forces and raid their convoys. Well, they're very militant.
Yeah, well, I would agree that they've got much more, they've got some really killer beats. They're more aggressive in tone. Collective Soul is just kind of lame sounding.
Yeah. Outcasts has the flow, so why not use it? Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, just the beats in general, they just lay it down. They just hit so much harder. Whoa, yeah, heaven, let your light shine. No, that's not punching anybody in the face.
Yeah, maybe they should have gone up against, like, I don't know, Creed.
I mean, that's a little better. Creed. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking like alterna rock groups, yeah. I mean, the Foo Fighters would have been better.
Foo Fighters in Andromeda, fighting with Foo.
Yeah, I mean, a Foo Fighter is the phrase Foo Fighter meant like an unidentified aircraft. Do you know about this? Like,
I did not know about this.
Yeah. So like in World War II, if you were a pilot and you saw an aircraft that you couldn't identify, and you might call it a Foo Fighter. Like if it showed up on your radar and it wasn't actually there, that was the phrase. It was a Foo Fighter, as if almost like it was an alien or something. Like it showed up, but it wasn't in the sky. What was it?
It was a Foo Fighter. Because you looked at it and you're like, who's this fool?
Yeah, sure. Yes. I'm just going to agree with you. but yeah, man. Sure. Yeah. Foo Fighters hit way harder than Collective Soul.
Definitely.
Anyway, back to the lore.
Right. Because they're not afraid, because Outcast is not afraid to strike against the initiatives, convoys and whatnot, they are definitely more of a threat. And they act somewhat of a space pirate faction. Definitely not the first space pirate faction we've covered on this Lorecast.
But the first in Andromeda from these groups.
Yes. It does seem like the first and most prominent space pirate faction in Andromeda, perhaps the only pirate faction. But with Sloane Kelly is a more capable Jack Sparrow and a less renowned, douchier Blackbeard.
Okay.
In terms of, and I put a special thought into trying to relate to people who have not played Andromeda what Sloane Kelly is like. In terms of her pirate likeness in Mass Effect Andromeda, Kelly is kind of a mashup of the totally lackadaisical killer demeanor, the quote, I could kill you, but I've got better shit to do. Like, lounge in my chair with my legs like I swear to God, every time you see Sloane Kelly, like she's in a different sitting position. Like this is a live show and people listening can't see this, but like my leg is like propped up on my chair.
Right.
And like then like you'll see her the next time and it'll be the other leg propped up on a different fucking chair.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It's like I'm the leader, but like, I'm a pirate leader.
Right. Like, someone get the controller and turn up the volume on the TV. Why can't you get it? Because I'm already sitting down with my leg propped up. Okay.
Yeah, exactly that. I could kill you, but I've got better shit to do.
Like, sit here because I'm already comfortable.
So a combo of that. It's a combo of that and Zaid Masani. And we all know Zaid, the lovable, very gruff English accent fellow who killed Vito Santiago to exact revenge on the Blue Suns.
Yeah, and we're not going to do the accents here. If you want, just go back and listen to that episode. We'll get too distracted. We have an episode to do. I'm sorry.
It's too many accents.
This episode will not get sidelined anymore.
About Sloane, by the way, she was a former Alliance personnel. So she was former military, and she served in the Skillian Blitz. So not exactly, a paper pusher. Sounds like she saw some actual action, but she was discharged for punching a superior officer because of, quote, bureaucratic bullshit.
That's not very military. Like, that's not okay.
Indeed.
You don't do that.
No, that's very, renegade, you could say.
Yeah, no, you don't do that and expect to stay in the military.
Yeah, no, not at all. And it's just funny because this is who Jan Garson chose to hire as her head of security. I mean, what?
No good.
Brilliant.
That was the best. Absolute. That's the best person that they got. Like, they went through all the applications and was like, yep, this is the one.
How scarce were the applications? And honestly, I don't think that this was actually even an applied for position. It's like This was handpicked. This was something that Gian Garson had to handpick. And I wonder, maybe, how much of a call did the mysterious benefactor have?
Yeah. Like, hey, I'm gonna fund you extra money for this. What was that sound? That was actually, so there's a lot of street racers in Portland. Fuck them, by the way. Wow.
And they're incredibly annoying. And when they go through downtown, the sound echoes off the buildings.
That's
which
amazing.
Is very nice.
That was really cool. But anyway, I was going to say, like, yeah, it sounds like one of those, like, I will up the budget by 10% if you put this person on your payroll. Yeah, that's. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A political this for that. Quid pro quo. And if you don't know what that is, it's relevant.
You get this for doing a thing for me. It's as simple as that. It's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. You do this, I do that. So Sloane Kelly rules Kadara Port with an iron fist, for sure. Like, and Kelly seems to be a complete egomaniac. She originally was distanced from the initiative leadership because of the order to deploy the Krogan to quell those rebellions. And we talked a little bit about that last episode. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely go listen to it if you're curious about that context. But the point is that the rebels lose. Tan gives her the ultimatum, leave or go back into cryo. She chooses to leave. And she leads a group with her, and then she handpicks more people to fill out the ranks of this Outcast faction. And so this is probably part of why the Outcasts have no problem raiding initiative convoys. They already don't think that the initiative is legitimate. And they are just doing it in the name of survival because they were given the ultimatum to leave or go back into cryo. So they probably didn't want to leave in the first place, but
yeah.
Kind of a rock and a hard place, but I don't feel sympathetic. I don't feel sympathetic to Sloane Kelly because when she presides over the rule on Kadara, she makes more enemies, and justifiably so. Because predictably, when you have a gang ruling a port on a town with no real law enforcement and no real political infrastructure, the gang starts reaping most of the resources that are going through the port for themselves. And then, everyone else is just left the table scraps. Right. So totally screws the economy that way. And then I wanted to read this other part from the wiki because it does a pretty good job of explaining why people might not like the Outcasts on Kadara. So it says, quote, "The Outcasts then instituted a simple but brutal system. Anyone can stay in Kadara Port as long as their protection fees are paid. Infractions and crimes against the peace will be dealt with severely and often in creative ways, like heads on spikes around landing pads to serve as a warning."
Sounds like a great way to make some friends.
Yeah. Violent, but when given in a British accent, sounds more polite.
Of course. Everything does.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that does a pretty good job of illustrating to people why the Outcasts aren't unilaterally popular.
Yeah. All right. Well, what are we going to talk about when we get back from the mid-break?
We're going to talk about the rival group that forms and starts working behind the scenes to get rid of the Outcasts, because you're not going to make, friends the way that the Outcasts have been behaving. So we can talk about that rival group a bit more after the break.
The Collective, because they just don't like those fat beats. All right, we'll be right back.
Message coming in. Patching it through.
I am sovereign, and this station is mine. I like the sound of that.
All right, so this is the second episode this week, which means we would normally read a new review, but we don't have any. So if you want to help us out, then drop a review on Apple Podcasts for us, 5 stars and a bunch of words, and we'll read it out on a future episode of the show. Also, you can rate us on Patreon, or not on Patreon. You can rate us on Patreon. You could leave a comment on the post on Patreon. On Spotify, you can rate us on Spotify. And if you are interested in supporting the show, you can do that on Patreon at patreon.com/Mass Effect Lorecast. But being as this is the second episode this week, we've got a very special planet card. What? Sam?
We do indeed. Planet cards are back again. And we are going to talk about Kadara because, we've been talking about it all episode anyway, right? So we should probably read some of Kadara's entry from the Codex. And we got to reference the Codex here because planet cards in Andromeda worked a little bit differently. So I wanted to read this part about Kadara from the Codex because it does a good job of laying the foundation for people to understand the setting in which this power struggle between the Outcasts and the Collective is happening. And so I'm just going to read from the Codex now. Kadara was of great interest to the Andromeda Initiative after it appeared on long-range surveys. Seemingly abundant liquid water and an oxygen-mixed atmosphere made it a strong candidate for settlement, earning it the designation Habitat 4. Closer-range surveys now reveal that Kadara's water sources are tainted and not potable. Of greater concern is the large settlement known as Kadara Port. Reportedly once a trade port for the Angara, it has been adopted by exiles, pirates, and mercenaries who use it as a staging ground. Kadara Port is considered a rogue state by the Nexus, given its strong ties to the exiles, and Initiative personnel are advised to keep their distance. Apex reports that Kadara Port is currently contested by two factions, the Pirate Outcasts, led by former Nexus security official Sloane Kelly, and a more mysterious group of spies and smugglers, broadly known as the Collective. So there's the entry of the Codex of Kadara. So
nice. Well, cool. I'm glad planet cards are back. And yeah, these are a little bit different. So this is also the part of the middle of the show where I remind you guys to check out the Robots Radio Discord and chime in with some of your thoughts on any of these episodes. We'd love to chat with you guys about Mass Effect and any of your theories on any of these things, or little bits of things that you want to chime in about that we may have skipped over, or even some thoughts that we might have missed. Feel free to chime in about that. Let's get on with the rest of the show.
Spit it out, or are you trying to build suspense?
You're so dense, sir. Obviously, I do not know as much about human relationships as I thought.
Okay, so we know now who the Outcasts and Sloane Kelly are, but what about the Collective? They're rivals, right? Like, and they're just as bad, if not worse. They've got to be worse, right? They're worse.
Well, it's kind of I don't think it's that obvious because the Outcasts are the ones in power. So they're the ones who are able to do a lot of this stuff. I will say one thing, that the Collective knows how to win a PR game. We'll get into that a little bit later. But if the Outcasts are the Blue Suns, just for anyone that's unfamiliar with Andromeda, but familiar with the original trilogy, if the Outcasts are the Blue Suns, then the Collective is Eclipse. The comparison could work on multiple levels. Their behavior, their structure, what they're specialized in, the way they act, and even the color schemes. So I kind of wonder at some point, how much of this dynamic was already written. But while the Outcasts are more in your face, steal your shit, kind of shoot you in the head if you disagree, the Collective is the sneaky, seedy, smuggling and intelligence op looking to get the upper hand on everyone. That's the dynamic.
Okay.
So the Collective rise as a challenger to the Outcasts' rule on Kadara Port, and like we've said, they're exiles from the Initiative too. They're all comprised of exiles from the Initiative. Each one of those groups has their own ties to the local Angara, of course, but they are primarily comprised of exiles from the Initiative. And the Collective, like I said about the PR, the Collective know how to make a PR campaign successful. And I say that because the Collective are well known to make these community outreach programs, helping the poor, helping the downtrodden and the forgotten in Kadara Port. So they're basically starting this grassroots campaign of resistance to the Outcasts, which is genius. And And it's easy, I think, for the collective to take advantage of this PR game when the current occupying gang is strangling the local economy, both financially and sometimes physically.
Yeah, they're not doing themselves any favors, so it's really easy to point that out. Use that.
Yeah, exactly.
Them. Right.
Yeah. So they deal in intrigue. They smuggle. They deal secrets, and they work behind the shadows to undermine the Outcasts, and specifically Sloane Kelly's authority. And then tensions between the two groups, they do seem to get to a lively ending we see in the game. I will get into that in a little bit. So if you don't want to know how the arc between the Outcasts and Collective ends, you might want to just skip ahead, or just, place your palms over your ears, scream la 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 la.
Earmuffs.
But if you have ear pods in, I don't know if that's going to work, but we'll see. We'll see. The collective is led by this mysterious figure that we already mentioned, named the Charlatan. In this big dramatic reveal, we eventually find out that the Charlatan is actually the lovable smuggler Reyes Vidal, who stole more than just our hearts. Be still my beating heart, Reyes Vidal. I'm, of course, being facetious here because I feel like Reyes is written to be that suave smuggler who the player character falls in love with. So about Reyes, we kind of went into a little detail about Sloane, but about Reyes, he doesn't actually participate in the uprising on the Nexus, but he still decided to leave. He just decided to leave on his own because, fuck the man. That's cool. The general gist I get from it. No, Reyes is uncomfortable, unhappy with living on the Nexus, thinks that Reyes can do better. So he leaves.
I feel like he talks in third person now. Reyes is uncomfortable. Reyes can do better. Reyes must leave.
I feel like Reyes is a Khajiit now.
Right. This one is uncomfortable. This one is Reyes. Reyes must leave. Reyes has wares for coin and skooma.
I would not doubt that Reyes was dealing in skooma. I really wouldn't doubt that. But we gave Sloane Kelly the red carpet treatment when it came to unlikely comparisons. So we got to do the same thing with Reyes Vidal. Reyes is the stereotypical space pilot rogue smuggler archetype that has become so trite in sci-fi, It's like someone mixed Han Solo with Poe Dameron.
Yeah, the swashbuckling, fly by the seat of his pants, charming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then sprinkled a little bit of Oberyn from Game of Thrones in there. Another Game of Thrones reference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, one of the main goods, though, that he seems to smuggle is information. It seems like Reyes smuggles more information than he smuggles anything else. Very little is actually known about Reyes because it turns out that his personnel records were mysteriously destroyed during the mutiny on the Nexus, along with a lot of other exiles who may or may not be working in the collective. So it sounds like intelligence experts and smugglers teamed up when they left the Nexus and were like, this Outcast shit is dumb. Like, we can take care of this like boneheaded oaf, Sloane Kelly, and we can do it from behind the scenes. That's just what I'm speculating here. The private conversations that were held. Mm-hmm. And they're highly special. So this is an interesting conundrum with Reyes. He's highly skilled in spying operations, yet he's somehow also a kind of reliable yet possibly alcoholic grifter who cannot pay a bar tab to save his life. And speaking of save his life, he's pretty good at that when he runs from fights.
Right. Yeah. I feel like this is one of those things that shows up in stories and games and then is later justified with, it was an act the whole time because this, whatever, like,
Yeah.
yeah, like he was actually in on it and it was an act, and they have some sort of justification why he's not as incompetent as he looks. But
this was my plan all along.
right. Or like,
yeah, I know.
Yeah, it looked like he was not able to pay his tab because he had to play the part of the person who was actually, but he's actually very wealthy, or, like he looks like he had to run from a fight, but in actuality, he was friends with the guy. So he couldn't shoot back, or he would have given away the fact that he was a double agent, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Weird combo. I know. Weird combo for a smuggler intelligence kingpin. And yet at the end of the day, he's respected as someone who always gets the job done. So maybe you're onto something there with, it was my plan all along. It was just deep cover. And maybe part of this contributes to how affectionate some of the Mass Effect fandom is about Reyes Vidal. We would be remiss without mentioning that you can romance him either as male or female Ryder. And I will refer people who want to hear more about that romance and whatnot to this one podcast that is on it's a Robots Rocket Club podcast.
Yeah.
2 Girls, 1 Ship.
Yep.
And they're all about the video game romances. However, they have told me that they won't be getting to Andromeda romances for a while.
But sometime in the future.
Sometime in the future.
This one
Perhaps.
is into everyone. Everyone is welcome in this one's bed. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you did, as long as you love me. This one. As long as you love this one.
That's the canon voice of Reyes now.
Quoting the Backstreet Boys. All right. We're pulling all these old 90s, early 2000s groups in on this episode. So you mentioned there is a dramatic reveal where we find out the charlatan is Reyes. So what happens in that?
Yeah, so there's this big, dramatic reveal. Dun, dun, dun. Basically, Sloane has been getting pestered by the collective. And Sloane leaves her second in command in charge, and then finds out that a few of her outcasts turned coat and beat up the second in command, and then said, oh yeah, well maybe you should have a meeting with the charlatan. So then they stage a meeting, and Ryder's there. And then when you show up, Ryder shows up with Sloane, and then Reyes is like looking for someone. So it's very, it's very stereotypical, I think, it's very trite. And little does Sloane know that there is a sniper set up behind the curtain, so to speak, and out of sight while they're talking. So the whole thing was a ruse to assassinate Sloane. And Ryder can choose whether or not to reveal this and save Sloane's life. So it's completely up to Ryder, but if Ryder chooses to reveal the sniper, then it's not going to succeed and you save Sloane's life. Or if you don't, as Ryder, if you don't choose to reveal that sniper, then Sloane gets taken out by the sniper and Reyes wins. So Reyes either wins by having her taken out by the hidden gun, or if you choose to save Sloane, there's this interrupt basically where Ryder can choose to shoot Reyes, but it doesn't kill him. It just maims him. And then he gets away anyway. Regardless, he gets away and then he's like smiling, like, yeah, 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 yeah.
Twisting the mustache.
Yes, yes. And then he flies away on a hot air balloon.
With a propeller.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This isn't the last you've seen of me.
Foiled again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just this whole dynamic where I was like all about the collective. I remember my first playthrough, I was all about the collective because the outcasts seemed like real assholes. And then you get to that meeting and you find out that this smuggler who you met way before is actually the charlatan. Oh my God, big gasp.gif. And then like there's that, and then like maybe you expect Reyes to like act as honorably as you have known Reyes to that point, but that's not what happens. And you notice a secret sniper setup, and you're like, man, this is kind of fucked up. So then you're like, in terms of morality, right? Like even if Sloane Kelly really is detestable, this is messed up. So you're forced to pick a side, and it's not easy. I think it turns it on its head at least a little bit. For me, if I'm playing a Paragon Rider, if I'm trying to play a Paragon Rider, then I'm gonna let it happen. But in my head canon, I'm gonna bitch out Reyes later, and then like never work with him again.
Right.
Because the thing is that if you let Reyes live, then like the Outcasts stay in power. But other than that entire dynamic with the Outcasts and the Collective, other than that and the specific missions that you are sent on in game, which I try not to cover too much in depth. I try not to talk about them. You know, if you want to walk through, there's other podcasts like that. But you know, there's not a lot that's known about the Collective. There's not a lot that's known about the Outcasts. My guess is these types of backstories, they could have been more fleshed out. They could have been more similar to some Milky Way factions had Andromeda had multiple games to do that.
Yeah, that's the feeling I get from this episode and the last episode, is that this whole thing is setting a foundation with these factions, with the Krogan breaking off and having their own, being kind of ostracized. You fast forward human generation from the events of what's going on in Andromeda here. And all of a sudden you have and who's to say there aren't more people showing up from the Milky Way? And you have reinforcements, and you have, another 1 million people showing up, reinforcing the Krogan population and, the Outcast population and all of these other groups. And now they've settled on their own systems and planets and places. And now you have a foundation of groups and peoples and ideologies that looks a lot more like the kind of political landscape that we came from in the Milky Way. And now you have a much more dynamic system that you can start writing stories around that feels a lot more familiar than what we started with in Andromeda.
Yep. Same stuff, different galaxy.
Right. Right. And I think that creates a format where you can write new stories, but you have a foundation that is something that is more along the lines of what fans of the original trilogy are probably looking for.
Yeah, probably so. And part of the reason that we love the original trilogy so much are those narrative callbacks. By the time you get to Mass Effect 2, Mass Effect 3, you bring in one of the characters that seemed minor in Mass Effect 1, but now you're like, oh, I remember that guy, or I remember that alien,
Right.
So we didn't get to do that with Andromeda.
Yeah. Or this race has this agenda. This race has this agenda. They're having a hard time cooperating. Oh, but now this race steps in and they're actually working with this race this time, and they didn't do that in the past. Like those kinds of things having distinct effects on the way the story plays out, rather than kind of lumping everybody together and just like, oh, and here's 2 new races from the new galaxy we're in. Like creating more complexity in this with the races that we already have, and then maybe even introducing new races from the new stuff and adding to that complexity.
Right. Let's not forget that the Jardin may not be gone. Like all that we know is that they're gone from the Helios cluster. They could very well still be somewhere around Andromeda.
So, yeah. So I feel like there's a lot more there, but I don't know that they're going to be revisiting that anytime soon. I think, Mass Effect 4 is probably going to be more Milky Way stuff. But anyway, where are we going from here?
There's a reason we spent most of this episode talking about more details about individual characters. We are wrapping up the factions and starting our 2nd year soon of the Mass Effect Lorecast. And part of that means that we're going to be focusing on episodes of the major and supporting characters of the series. including squad mates. I've been teasing this for quite a while. A lot of people have been saying, oh my God, when are you going to cover Garrus? When are you going to talk about Liara? When are you going to talk about Anderson or Hackett or yada, yada, yada? Insert favorite character here.
Yeah, Danny DeVos.
Now, the answer is briefly that now we're going to start talking about these major and minor characters in the second year of the Mass Effect Lorecast. And I thought that this episode was probably a good bridge, between the factions and individual characters. And now that we have this new episode structure of 2 episodes per week, 2 smaller ones, it's going to allow us to alternate the minor character episodes with some scientific ones, or ones on smaller lore pieces throughout the series, like the corporations of Mass Effect, or this little known side plot that you didn't even know about, that kind of thing.
Other bands in the galaxy.
How Outcasts still impacts music in Cora's Den.
Right. Danny DeVolis' favorite dishes.
Why Danny DeVolis makes an excellent impromptu bowling ball.
Yes.
Yeah.
The answer is because he's round, but then we'll get into the details of exactly how round. You think that's a very short episode, but it's actually pretty long.
How round is Danny DeVolis? Tune in at 11. Yeah. So I think that it will be good to break up the character episodes, the individual character episodes, with the shorter topical episodes, because there's so many different major and minor characters. Like, for example, the squad mates alone among all 3 are like 20 plus, right? I think there's around 20 squad mates.
Right.
If we did just an episode on like 1 episode per week on the squad mates, then that would be like damn near half a year.
Almost half a year of episodes. Right. Yeah.
So then you bring in the minor and supporting characters, and then you're like almost at like 2/3 of a year, maybe.
Yeah. And so Danny DeVolis could be like an entire month of episodes all by himself.
Honestly, I'd prefer it. No, I don't. I'm kidding. Please don't make me do that. So yeah, if we're interspersed,
what if we did patron only Danny DeVolis episodes, bonus episodes for patrons?
We
just make up lore about Danny DeVolis, patron bonus episodes,
fashioning headcanons about Danny DeVolis.
Yeah, we'll just do like I don't know,
5-minute shorts.
If you're tier 3, you get like a once a month Danny DeVolis patron bonus episode.
Yeah,
where we just make up Danny DeVolis headcanon.
It'll just be improv too.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I like that idea.
We'll play with it. We'll play with it. Maybe we'll get more people to sign up on the Patreon for our Danny DeVolis patron only episodes.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say is that, having those scientific episodes in there, or the corporations, the topical ones, it's going to make this show a lot more palatable week by week.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I think it'll be awesome. Also, Dathalid, I don't know if I said your name right, says Danny DeVolis romance when BioWare. The thing about Danny DeVolis is he's romanceable by every character in the series.
Yeah.
Every main character, every kind of shepherd, every kind of lead character, every kind of other alternate character. Like, you could happen to like stumble into any of the other characters' rooms on your ship, and Danny DeVolis might just be there, like quickly putting his pants back on, being like, "Oh, sorry," and then like,
a lot of people don't know this, but Danny DeVolis is actually Blasto's concubine.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a little disgusting when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a little weird, but who's gonna judge? Not me.
Anyway, point is, people can expect from here on out, they can expect profile feature episodes alternating with topical ones. And I'm excited to dive into those.
It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So
Yes.
I hope you guys are too. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, the double episodes each week, other than the patron week. And thanks for being here, everybody. You got anything else going on you want to share before we head out, Sam?
Yeah. I am streaming every Saturday, Monday, and Thursday. Sassy Ship Saturdays, doing my first FimShep playthrough. I'm almost completed with Mass Effect 1. So if you want to see me do Ilos and the final mission with Saren, and I am being Renegade, by the way, trying to be as Renegade as possible for the first playthrough ever, too. So completely different choices are inbound for me. I've already done a few that made me cringe, just because I hate doing them.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in that, I'm streaming that every Saturday, sometimes doing an impromptu extra bonus little Mass Effect stream. And if you're interested in catching the other games that I'm streaming, go ahead and follow me on Twitch at N7 The Legend, and Twitter, same handle.
Awesome. And I've got my shows over at robotsradio.net, but also all the other shows on the Robots Radio Network, including all the main shows, all the Robots Radio Rocket Club shows, everybody who's on the network. You can find all of their shows listed over there and check everything out. There's lots of great creators and lots of great content. Also, I launched earlier this week the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, which I've been having a blast putting together. So go check that out if you're a fan of the Lord of the Rings and you want to dig into the lore of Tolkien's amazing world that has inspired so many writers, so many creators, and so many video games and so much else. And then also, I'm still raising money for helping out people in need over in Ukraine for medical supplies and all sorts of stuff. And we are up as of the recording right now, thanks to two other people who donated during the recording of this episode. Thanks to Jaxus and Larry L. for donating. We're up to $824. And that's amazing. We just blew past the $800 goal, which started tonight. And thank you to everybody for donating. There's a link in the show notes. There's also a link on the Robots Radio Discord in the announcement section. You can get to those on there. And also you can check out the little the QR code on the video. So if you check out the Mass Effect Lorecast YouTube channel and find this episode on there. So that's what we got going on. We'll be back next week with 2 new episodes. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, make sure that you are legitimately good for your job and not just somebody who's going to punch your commanding officer and get kicked out of the military and then get into a position that you don't belong in and then turn into a rebellious force that becomes a space pirate, because that's not good for anybody unless you're dropping some fat beats because you're Andre 3000. See you guys next week. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Mass Effect Lorecast. We'd love to hear your opinion and thoughts on the lore of Mass Effect. Reach out to us on Twitter at Mass Effect Cast, or check out the Robots Radio Discord. Also, you can send us an email at masseffectlorecast@gmail.com.